Yeah, and that's the sound of a Topo Chico right there.
I could almost sense the Topo Chico. I could feel the effervescence in the bottle popping.
We need to get you a case to have stored ice cold. It really is the best thing. I shit you not. It's so refreshing.
So refreshing. It's Friday. It's Topo Chico Friday.
Are you doing anything this weekend for Labor Day?
I am tonight, remarkably enough, because of our sponsorship with Topo Chico. I am going to eat Mexican with my daughter Fiona before she is distributed to college at Savannah. College of Art and Design.
Otherwise known as SCAD.
SCAD, thank you very much. This Thursday. So we shall go have some tamales and tacos and what have you. Topo Chico, maybe a margarita for Dad.
Nice.
Then, really nothing, I like to have a certain amount of not do anything time, whatever that means. It never truly comes, to fruition. And you?
Oh, well, tonight is Friday Night Lights, so Wilmington has a game, St. Helena High versus Healdsburg.
Okay.
So we're going to go up and do that. Play a little golf tomorrow, and prepare for the Georgia UT Martin opener.
That's right.
So that's going to be sweet. And then and just chill, really. I mean, I don't have any other big plans. I was out this morning sampling vineyards for grape sugar and seeing, trying to set up our first harvest pick. So I'm pretty much doing that Saturday and Monday. I don't know. I mean, we're not ready to start picking, but I never take off Labor Day. It's normally I'm always picking for harvest, but this year is late. So it's all good.
Picking is this time. I mean, is this the time of year? This is full on picking time.
Harvest time. I normally say, our harvest period is Labor Day through Thanksgiving.
Okay.
We're picking. Sometimes I'm picking. Last year I started picking August 20th. Mm-hmm. So that shows you how much later we are this year. I might pick stuff early, and then I'm usually almost always done by Halloween. But once you're done picking, you still have grapes that are out there fermenting, and you're not done with the process. So I say Thanksgiving we're generally done, and this year it's definitely going to go up to Thanksgiving.
What dictates pushing it back, pushing it forward in terms of you picking?
The weather. So it was just, it was a wetter winter, a cool, wetter spring. So things started off a little slow. And that just means, from the bud break, the new growth coming out. And then after that, you have, flowering of the grape clusters, and you have fruit set, and then blah, blah, blah. There's all these processes along the way. And if it starts late, it's going to be later when you pick it. It's as simple as that. It follows a pattern. So if you have bud break super early and, the end of March and things got rolling and you had flowering early, then you're going to harvest really early. But if you have late bud break and the process starts a little bit later because it's cold, it's pretty much just temperature driven, then you harvest later.
This is fascinating information.
Do you like this setup? Is this
I love it. It's lovely. It's a lovely view of your studio. And whatever I always eludes me again what you name this room.
The greenhouse.
The greenhouse. It's just a beautiful room of funness.
And it's people would think greenhouse as in a growing room, but no, it's just the walls are green and the trim is green, so I call it the greenhouse.
It is literally the greenhouse.
And you know what? We've done like a few different iterations of how we were going to record and set up here. This being the podcast about starting a podcast.
Yes.
But, when we first started messing around, this room was not complete. And then when we did start doing some recording in here, there were no carpets or anything on the floor, so it was super echoey. So I think it sounds better now. Then I also like, in the theme of drop the check, that it's,
Mhm.
the concept of it being, people just sitting down for a meal and having a conversation, and then, you drop the check at the end. Well, how appropriate is that, I've made this table here, my dining room table, and it's just like we're sitting at the dinner table. How about that?
It's perfect. It really, I feel a little inadequate and maybe envious on this side of the table.
Well, you're
I
in
feel like-
HQ. You're headquarters.
Well, yeah. Well, I mean, where? Maybe. Hang on. Is there like a front of the house?
Yeah,
Like the front of
there
the
you
house,
go.
somewhere that's in the front of the house. That doesn't
I'm front
get
of the
to, like,
house. You're back of the house.
See, I'm the back of the house.
Yeah.
That's just the mark of my life. There's
I like this
symbolism there. It's wonderful. It looks beautiful. For anyone that could not be able to see this, there is Robbie is sitting at a lovely dining table with an empty glass of wine right now. A wonderful, probably the most wonderful sparkling water Topo Chico in front of him. Yep. And it looks like it would look like when you go to the sometimes you get to go to the restaurant and you get to have that little off room, or maybe sometimes even the one that's right attached to the kitchen.
Yeah.
It's somewhat of the look that you have there in that room that you are, Robbie.
I agree. I can get that vibe. I think that's a good thing.
I like that.
I do have the empty wine glasses here because I don't know. I mean, I did get a couple bottles of Pearson Meyer in case Joey wanted to taste those. He may bring one of his, wines. I don't know.
Okay.
Obviously, we've said many times, the point of this is not to sit here and talk about wine or food for that matter. It's our conversations with our friends and colleagues and all of that kind of good stuff. So, but you want to be prepared. Right?
Sure.
How embarrassing is it if you show up at a winemaker's house and it's like, can I try your wine? No, I don't have any. Do you have a glass for me? No, I don't have any glasses. So, I like to have it here. Now, I prefer to drink my Topo Chico out of the cold bottle that it comes in.
Okay.
But I did offer a little water glass here as well.
That's interesting.
It's proper dinner service. You want to
absolutely
provide
right.
the guest with whatever, suits their terms.
That's important to some people. Some people like their beer. They like it. They can go, I like it out of the bottle, the can. Me, myself, I like the proper glass.
Well, what do you think?
Let's bring it on. Let's start this service.
That's a good thing. Yeah, let's begin service. Are we ready for service?
Let's start this service. Welcome to Drop the Check. Today's special guest, wine and children maker, restaurateur and entrepreneur, and quickly becoming an internet sensation, Joseph Wagner.
Do you need anything?
I think I'm all set. I brought this just in case.
Yeah, and I have a Pearson Meyer Chard here, some Pearson Meyer Pinot, whatever. We don't have any rules here, so
Okay.
it's just go with the flow. Would like the water. Mike and I laugh all the time about Topo Chico. It's my favorite water.
I totally agree with you.
And it's the best water, right?
I like the kick that it's got.
It's
a little more carbonation.
Yeah, and the bubbles are finer. It's delicious. Mike, for your benefit and for everyone listening, Joey Wagner is a local here in Napa Valley, and you basically, other than school, have spent your whole life here.
Yep.
And does a lot of very, very cool projects that a lot of people are familiar with, and that's the deal. But thanks for showing up and being here. Is that your phone beeping or mine?
I think that's yours, but yeah, thanks for having me.
I try to tell everyone to turn their shit off, and I'm the one who's definitely leaving it on.
It happens.
But anyway, you were coming down. I'm guessing you were having a meeting at your restaurant down the street.
Yep, we're actually converting that restaurant over to a tasting room.
Oh, so, cool.
Our tasting room is next door.
Yep.
Currently, Quilt & Co. is what we call it.
Yeah.
So we have all of our brands that we sell nationally, but then a lot of our DTC stuff that's much smaller in production. Just our fun little projects.
Yeah.
We needed more space, so we moved into the next door building. Restaurant business is tough.
Yeah.
I would recommend anybody thinking about getting into it, don't.
Well, and it's funny because I was thinking about, I figured that's what you're coming from down the street. Mike, for your knowledge, there's a restaurant called Aval that's right down the street on Main Street. You and I may have gone there. I can't even remember. But going back to you growing up here, when we were younger, I moved here when I was 25. we wouldn't come to Napa.
No, not at all.
Not at all. I mean, we lived up Valley, and to differentiate it, up Valley is, Calistoga, St. Helena, Yountville, Oakville. Down Valley is Napa, effectively, and we would just stay up Valley. There's nothing to do down here. So after the reconstruction of the floodplain and all of that development, people like you that came down and opened up restaurants, I mean, I was all about it because I only moved down here 4 years ago. And like, I try to go there and support. I try not to eat at home. I try to go support all you guys who have gone to the effort of, your restaurant was beautiful.
And the tasting room will still have food. We still have the culinary team there, so we're not losing that part of it. But we just felt we needed more space for tasting and wanted to incorporate food and wine pairings.
Yeah.
But I mean, to your point about downtown Napa, it went from 20 years ago when I was a kid. It was the Skid Row version, of Napa. I mean, it was people didn't want to be down here. There was a little bit of crime, not bad, just petty stuff. And after the planning department, which I don't generally give any government, local, federal, or anything credit, I got to give the local government credit. They did a great job in replanning this historic, core of downtown Napa. Yeah. And it's turned out to be just a great place for people to end their day. There's more hotels down here. There's great options for dining, good tasting rooms, and you spend your day up Valley. You're enjoying, the beauty, the scenery of this agricultural region and the ag preserve and great wineries. And you come down here, have a bite, go back out, and it's a little more lively than what the old Napa used to be. Which
way more lively.
Shut down at 9 p.m. That's it.
Totally. Although it's funny, at a vow one night, I was thinking about this earlier too. We'll go in there, end of evening, even if we haven't, we're not eating dinner, just for cocktails. Because it's a very stylish place. I mean, it looks, really cool. I bring people from out of town. They're like trying to say, "Hey, Napa is happening." And they're like, "Oh, this place is rad. It looks like, someplace in, Manhattan or something like that." But so I'm in there one evening, and it's just starting to close down. And there's this girl sitting at the bar, a group of girls, and she comes over and she's like, "Y'all look like y'all are from around here. Where do we go like right now?" And I was like, well, I can tell you. I was like, "We are from here, but where are you from?" And she was like, "Oh, I'm from Georgia," which, I'm from Georgia too, whatever. And I was like, "Oh, that's great." And she's like, I was like, "Where do you live?" "You probably never heard of this little place called St. Simon's Island," which is where my dad lives.
No way.
And so she lives like 4 blocks from my dad.
Wow.
So I was like, see, you come to Napa Valley, and, you meet all the local Southern people. So.
We find a way for locating ourselves across the country, some way about us Southerners, right?
And the funny thing is, I was with Kent Jarman too, who's Louisiana guy. So all the Southerners come and go.
Yeah, on that note, since California,
since you said a Southerner and you met a Southerner there, and you guys jumped right into that, both of you guys are in Napa. Kind of maybe if you could give us a little background, Joey, like even how you got here. Like, well, what is your background that got you to Napa?
Birth.
Yeah, so let's back it up.
It started with birth. Before that, it started with immigrating.
Yes.
So, no, my family actually immigrated here in the 1850s, which at least my first relatives that landed here in Napa were 1850s, which was way early on. It wasn't much, right? Napa was a small community, a lot of homesteaders, a little bit of agriculture, and slowly people started planting grapes and that sort of thing. And my family came out of Alsace, which is a part of southern France now, but I believe at the time it was actually it was German territory. That's always been one of those fought over areas of Europe. So they made it out here. They started making wine. They got shut down by Prohibition, which is that like that black stain of our drinking culture. It sure would have been nice if that never happened. We'd have so much more history, and where we've come in the wine business in general. Imagine how far along we'd be now. So I was, so fast forward to the 70s, my family wasn't making ends meet. They were growing grapes still, making home wine, predominantly prunes and walnuts. Though is what they grew. And, they weren't making ends meet with that. So, they were going to either sell the farm and move to Australia, or they were going to, and at that time, the Australian government was giving water and land away to American farmers, trying to bolster that part of their economy, at least grow it a bit. And my grandfather was about 60 at the time, and he asked my grandmother and dad, said, "Hey, if we're going to stay here, we're starting a commercial wine business, and but I want all of us to be in on this if we're going to." And my dad said, "Yeah." He was 19 years old.
This is early 70s or 60s?
This is early 70s now.
Okay.
So they were making the decision in the late 60s. They built a small winery and eventually had their first vintage in 1972 under Camus Vineyards.
Yeah.
So, it still wasn't a cool thing back then. Wine was, it was still thought of as kind of like, if you want good stuff, you got to get, what France
Of
has.
course,
Right?
no respect for the U.S.
Yeah. And soon enough, the drinking culture and the fine wine culture had been migrating through the U.S. already, and they were just waiting for American producers to be able to produce something that would be at the level of what the old world was, and they were able to kind of knock it out of the park with Cabernet here.
Yeah,
established a brand, and then fast forward to when I was born, 1982, born in Rutherford. It was me, my brother, and like 2 other kids our age. It's a tiny town,
very tiny.
you blink and you pass it.
Yeah,
but agricultural community, and what I got to see in my life growing up here was that you still have that ag piece of it, but it was predominantly agriculture through the 80s and 90s. The 90s is what really changed it, where you had this amount of money coming in from the dot-com boom.
Yeah.
People buying their piece of paradise, building their winery, their cult winery, and that sort of thing. And so it really elevated Napa on a world stage very quickly. And I got involved in 2001, started making my own wines.
Yeah, so I was trying to put that time frame together. So you were right at 21. But did you go to Davis?
I didn't.
Okay.
No.
So at 21, you're already starting your brand. Were you working with Camus at that point?
Well, so what happened was I actually moved to Mexico.
Okay.
And I was farming table grapes down there.
Okay.
So I took a semester off. I was chasing a girl around. I'll tell you that.
Of course,
so
there you go. Yeah. That's how it all comes down to. Yeah.
That also happens.
So I was chasing a girl around, and we were hopscotching to different colleges, trying to, be close to each other and adjusting to, whatever school, and doing these kind of like inter university transfers. And I took a semester off, and I was going to be transferring to Davis finally, and going into their VIT program, or viticulture and enology program. And I took a semester off, went down and thought, I'm going to go farm table grapes. Had an opportunity, was in the middle of the desert, and did that for 6 months full time, and then continued it on part time for about 2 years after that. When I moved back, I was like, man, I'm getting a paycheck. I'm in love.
Yeah,
I want to start a career, and began working for my dad in vineyards, and then started making my first vintage of Pinot Noir in 2001, and that was kind of like, it was not a cool thing at the time,
right?
Yeah,
and that was under Belglass.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. Which is can you just
I'll
grab this?
Pull that up.
But you want to open it since we're talking about
Yeah,
it?
let's do it.
So that was 2001 when you started that, the first vintage.
Yeah, first vintage 2001,
Okay.
released in 2002, and then
which became, pretty prominent for Pinot Noir, for some of the first California Pinot Noir that was on a national stage. I mean, I was into wine in the 80s in Atlanta, Georgia. Not a lot of people were.
Yeah,
but we loved our Pinot, of course. From the East Coast, we favored European wines, but there were California Pinots that were around. But in terms of a national stage and national presence, Belglass was definitely one of those first ones that had a lot of exposure.
It was, I'll tell you, it was a hard sell in the beginning. I learned a lot in those first couple of years. Part of it, of course, was that people weren't familiar with California Pinot Noir, and at the price points we were at, they're like, my customers come in, they're looking for Burgundy.
Yeah.
And so I had to create a new strategy, and that kind of became this whole restaurant focus by the glass, coming out with a lower priced wine, and that evolved into what became Mayomi. But during that period of time, those first couple years, it was out there and just trying to get it out, and we weren't selling a lot of wine. But I knew that every time I tasted a consumer on it, and there were, I'll tell you, it's like a dozen producers at the time, and we'd have a few small, really passionate Pinot events, and you'd have 50 to 100 consumers come.
Yeah,
we thought it was awesome.
Yeah.
Sideways hit a couple years in,
right?
And those events went from a dozen producers and 100 up to 100 consumers to 500 producers and thousands of consumers, and you're like, holy shit, how do I keep the attention when they leave this place if they like the wines? And this crazy red wax dip, in hindsight, it wasn't intentional. It was really to differentiate between a lower price tier product we had versus this. And it really gave visual recognition. So, I just imagine a consumer walks into a fine wine shop and they're like, I had this Pinot. I loved it. I don't remember the name because none of our names are easy to remember. It's
right.
Yeah. And it's like, well, it's got this crazy red wax dip. And they're like, oh, that's got to be Belglass.
Yeah.
And so I really think that helped keep us in people's minds during that growth.
And isn't there a story, which I think I know, but I'll let you say, about the wax? Didn't you have to do some research on getting that taken care of? Is this true, or someone else tell me?
Well, there's a lot of stories about the wax. I mean,
but does it have to do with the bourbon?
Oh no, there is one story with the bourbon with Maker's Mark.
Okay. I wasn't going to say names, but yeah.
Oh, I could drop the name. So I'd have a lot of people calling me just saying like, this is a pain to open. You got to make this easier. And it was,
because were you doing it originally all by hand?
All by hand, and we didn't have a pull tab, and so you'd have a wine dinner, and you got servers that are just using a cleaver to try to knock the top off. And so we reformulated the wax, and I saw that Maker's Mark had a little pull tab. It was like a reinforced piece of tape that wrapped around. And so I called up, and big company. I thought, I'll be lucky if I talk to anybody. So I call them up and just say, I'd like to talk to the production manager. Just got a question about the wax and the pull tab. She patches me through, and I get this really nice Southern guy.
Yeah, of course. See, again, it all goes back to the South.
And so we're just BSing about stuff, and I'm telling him what we're doing, and I said, I really like the pull tab that you got, and would love to get the vendor so I can get those zero like die cut and whatever else. And we started talking about the wax, and so I told him about the reformulation of the wax to make it easier to rip through. So from what I understand from our vendor for the wax is that Maker's Mark switched over to this wax supplier. Then I got the contact.
Really? That's funny.
And so whoever was doing their wax beforehand probably has a target on my
my back. Of course. So that's not the story that I had heard. So that's even better. And so also, just to be clear, and sorry if this is like boring you to tears, Mike, but this is interesting to me because, production, Mike's done a lot of film production and all of that. So he can appreciate the half of the work that we do is not even in the farming. It's putting it into the damn bottle, right? So is all this wax done by a human's hand, or is it mechanical?
We're 60% mechanical right now, 40% by hand.
Okay.
We're actually having a new machine built.
Okay.
And it's amazing. I mean, I'll talk about automation in general and I'm sure we'll get into all this crazy stuff.
Since you just going back, since you're still a young man, but you talk about from 2000 until now, how much technology has changed.
Oh my God,
it's crazy.
It
and
is.
From 1970 to 2000 was a sea change.
Yeah. I mean, even if you're looking at building anything right now, if you're building a winery, the amount of technology you can put in for efficiency. Yeah. Oh my God. It's just but it's almost like every 5 years you can re-up that because it goes so damn fast.
So here's something I thought about, Joey, when you were just talking about, there's a couple of things that you mentioned that I thought about in terms of perception and where we are right now, and even how you've evolved with wine. When you said that you came here and you started making wines, and people are not accepting those because they're thinking, really the wines that are supposed to be coming from France right now. And so these California wines are not there. And then, the perception starts to happen here. But two things that you mentioned that ends up being more of like marketing than product initially ends up being that wax is like the blue mark next to your name in social media, which you started to create the verified blue mark, right? And then you said Sideways. When Sideways hit, all of a sudden you can't keep wine, you can't keep it because of the perception is, holy shit, everyone's got to have this wine, right?
I think that's very, very true. I mean, you got to have something that stands out that, and I mean, it's not always easy to find something, especially in wine packaging, which has been very much the same for centuries.
Right.
You got a glass bottle, you got a cork, and you fill it and you put a label on it. And so having a feature that really stands out, I learned the value of that young, and it was completely by accident. But in any case, I think you can make that point where you want something that is a standout feature that people gravitate to, that they remember, and that'll help keep it in their craw so that they
absolutely
right, they become fans.
Yeah, it is. It's interesting, Mike, when you're saying that about like the marketing or the movie Sideways, and here we are on the ground worried so much about our farming practices and our fermentation techniques and whatever, and we do a great job of that. But then things without our control change everything, and that's the American consumer. But I mean, I think that's still worldwide and everything. I mean, I don't know. It's interesting, but so I know that obviously your family was in wine, but it is interesting that you left St. Helena, left Napa, go down to Mexico. why was there this ambition to be farming, be grapes, just because it's what you knew? Did you think anything about it? Did you think what dad and granddad did is cool, or you just liked it?
I knew enough about it. I had worked in vineyards predominantly growing up. And then when I got into my later teenage years, my dad let me work in the winery a little bit, but I really loved the vineyards. Agriculture was always my thing. And looked at table grapes. It's like, I'll try it out. I've got an opportunity. He was a farmer that was down in SoCal, and so I went down there and learned a ton. I mean, if you think about growing grapes, we're going for purely quality and
Here.
balance here, right? I mean, that's what we do with wine grapes. When it comes to table grapes, the ones you're buying at the store, it's really about sugar and aesthetics. And so you want to reach your minimum sugar of 15.5 or 16 bricks, and then it's got to be a beautiful cluster.
Yeah.
And everything happens so fast in this growing season down in the desert, right? You're hitting 115 degrees. You got full canopy on a gable system, and you're trying to protect the fruit, but you're also growing the hell out of these vines. I mean, they grow fast.
And are they getting just one harvest, or are they
just one down there? Just one harvest. You could push them to two, but then you're using a whole lot of chemicals. Which is a crazy thing to think about, getting 2 harvests in a year.
I know. Well, go to Hawaii and it's like, so again, to clarify, we get, for our wine grapes, for what we do, we have our 1 harvest per year, and the growing season kind of goes this very simple calendar. But in warmer tropical areas, you can push vines. They really effectively don't have to go dormant, and they'll just keep cycling through the process, which is crazy. I think it kills the vines there's a lot of stress on them.
It does. And I mean, I've seen some, because during that time, I was able to go around and see a lot of other table grape farms, and the amount of I mean, you think about it like you're loading yourself up with steroids, right? You're doing the same thing to these vines. You are going through your irrigation system. You're going through your foliar sprays. You're loading them. And I've seen vines split open and foam out excess nutrients,
like pumping them up so much.
They're getting so big, and then you girdle the bottom of them to try to to stop the sap flow, so you actually increase the size of the berries. You're just putting these things through hell. I mean, like I think pushing them two harvests in a year is too much. Yeah.
So you just went down there because you loved farming and doing that whole thing. That's pretty cool.
Learned a lot, and then applied that when I got back here. Just a very different lens.
Of course, of course. But it's farming. I mean, there's people that there are people who come into our industry or come into the Napa Valley from other areas. Lots of people, like you said, from like tech or whatever. They might be a successful doctor or lawyer or business person or whatever, and have a bunch of cash and come in and think they know how to do viticultural and winery operations. They're terrible at it. But I do find that people that come in from other, sometimes like from restaurant business or something like that, actually do well because they understand the inner workings. And while farming for wine production is different than farming for table grapes, you still have the knowledge base and passion and the understanding of the work that goes into doing it. So it does tie in for sure.
Well, there was a senator who had a quote. It's a long quote, but I'm going to piecemeal parts of it together. It was Daniel Webster, and he was like in the 1840s, I think, right? And so he had mentioned something to the effect of, when tillage begins, other arts follow, right? And so he wasn't applying it to wine, but when you think about, the first time you start cultivating and you're growing something, you're controlling it. Everything that follows is some form of art to create the product that's going to be enjoyed, right? And I think that applies very well to wine. He also said that farmers are the foundation of human civilization. Because prior to that, you were a bunch of roaming barbarians going around hunting and gathering and everything. I was like, God, this,
we could make it a lot easier.
Yeah.
That's right.
So I thought it was a great quote, and I've always loved the idea that farming is really the core of our civilization, whether people want to admit it or not. I mean, I got plenty of haters when I post something like we're ripping a vineyard, we're loosening up the soil 3 feet down so the vines, the roots have a little more space to grow. And you're like, oh, Mother Earth is dying, and you're like, oh my God, buddy, what? You don't eat meat, probably. Are you also not eating soy products? Because
exactly, because that comes from.
There's a lot of things that die when you create when you make soy products.
Well, you're talking about like the haters out there of what we do. There's another funny thing. And this is, I won't mention, names or whatever, but I'm farming a vineyard right in the heart of St. Helena. And I try to be, good steward to the neighbors around there. Yeah. But of course, this is a non-St. Helenian who bought a home right beside this vineyard. And, we have wind machines going from time to time, or we're spraying in the evening, or in this case, it was at harvest time. And we had water trucks coming in, and we had, harvesting equipment coming in at, 3 o'clock in the morning, or whatever the case may be. And the guy lives right beside the vineyard. And he started like calling me on my cell phone in the middle of the night, complaining, can you keep those out of there? And I was like, sir, I'm going to try to do everything that we can. By the way, this guy also, we were redoing the vineyard. We had end posts sitting there, and he calls up nicely, hey, are you using those end posts? Can I have them? Like, sure, trying to be a nice neighbor. Go ahead, take whatever you want. Just, let me know.
No good deed goes unpunished.
Right.
That's right.
And so now he's calling me in the middle of the night, and he's like, you said blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, sir, you live right in the middle of an agricultural community. This vineyard was there. You moved in later and bought your house knowing you were right beside a farming. We have all full rights to farm this property. And he goes, you're not in agriculture. You just make booze.
Yeah.
And so I didn't even, I hung up on him.
Yeah.
This is literally at 3 o'clock in the morning. And, that's that attitude. Like, oh, we want to come to wine country where it's beautiful and blah, blah, blah. But don't, make any noise and don't farm. You're not really a farmer. And that's what really ground my nerves. It's like, same thing. My family back in Georgia, they don't think I farm. It's like, what are you talking about?
There's a lot more time that goes into farming than there is into wine. I'll tell you that.
Yeah.
You don't get the farming right, you're not going to get good wine. But man, we have a vineyard right in St. Helena as well, and we have had multiple experiences like that. So what? I just had one last weekend, and the police were called. And no joke. And so I'm talking to the officer, and then he's like, "Can you just call the guy?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I'll give him a call. I'll get his number." And he's going down this list of excuses. And, somebody in my house has asthma. She had to close the doors and windows. I'm like, oh my God, she had to close the doors and windows. Where, there's a little bit of dust in the air. It's not, we weren't even spraying, we're cultivating. So little things like that. But what we started doing, and this really works well to shut people up.
Yeah.
You say, look, we have an idea that will rectify the issue. So you guys have a little barrier. So you feel a little safer. So we just plant a row of high hedges right on our side of the property line, and they lose the whole view of the vineyard.
Right.
Exactly. Right. That doesn't just works. Not just
also funny is they want the view of the vineyard.
Yes.
But they don't want the dust.
That's
exactly. It's like we had it's getting into stupid farming stories, but it is kind of funny. I don't know, Mike, if this is entertaining at all, but I find it wildly entertaining. So we're farming up on Mount Veeder. And we, neighbors never complained about anything. And, we're doing our regular spray program, doing sulfur sprays, et cetera. And we had a little bit of a mite infestation, and we sprayed GC Mite, which is a product. Have you ever used it before?
I have not used it.
GC Mite is garlic clove.
Okay.
It's beyond organic. It's literally, emulsification.
Like
garlic and clove. Well, it smells like garlic and clove, but you maybe not identify it when it's just floating there like that. We had more complaints from neighbors. I'm choking. There's poison coming in. We're like, it's garlic and clove. We're trying to be as nice and responsible as we can, and we get more complaints about that than any sulfur spray or anything else. But
that's impressive. I got to look into that. That sounds good.
Yeah, it works. There's lots of products out there, but maybe you can spray it in that vineyard next to
that. Really.
Or on your salad.
Yeah, exactly. Well, anyway, so then just moving forward and continuing on. So you found good success in developing first with Belle Gloss, and then expanding that into Maomi and to your other brands, and it's just nice to see and to hear that backstory, that you had that passion just to do it and just to be a part of it. It's funny that I moved here when I was 25 years old, and I always tell the story. So you would have only been 15 at the time. I'm 10 years older than you. And so when I was at 25, I hardly knew any locals. And, I say now there was either one of two things. One, they're younger, like, you were, or a lot of the guys who were my age had gone away. And like, fuck Napa Valley. I want to get out of here. I lived, I'm a country boy. I got to get out, get to the city. And they go out into the real world. And when I was like 30, they all started showing back up again.
I got the same experience with all my friends.
Really?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And still some of them at like 40, 42 are they're trying to get back here.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's it's an experience that I didn't have because I am an outsider, but now I've got to observe it more so through, our kids. We have kids the same age and that are buddies. And I think I'm curious to hear your, this is a long-winded question, but curious to hear your perception, but I had always heard those stories that people were like, we live in Podunkville, I want out of here. My kids have really enjoyed being here, and they really, really genuinely appreciate growing up in the Valley. Now, Will's moving to Seattle, and he's interested in law and finance and whatever, that type of thing. Well, maybe he can use that in the wine world, but right now he wants to go off and see the world. I completely get it, but in general, they have a very positive view of growing up here. What was I mean, I know you like the farming part, but did you feel like you were a country boy?
Yeah, it was. I mean, I definitely felt like I wanted to get out of here when I was in my mid-teens, late teens, and that's exactly it. You move out and you realize real quickly how nice it is here.
Right.
That the people are great, the culture is great, it's beautiful, and I've got a couple kids that have kind of gone through that or are going through it currently. But they all have an appreciation for it. So I saw it very quickly that I wanted to get back as quick as I could and get into the industry. And what I'll say about the wine industry, I mean, everybody should follow what they love, right?
Yeah.
And you should experiment in your, late teens, early 20s to find out what you actually love rather than, that's your time. You can make mistakes. You can challenge whatever it is that you thought you were going to do and get totally out of the box without any real recourse. So when I got out of wine, I realized, or out of grapes and whatever, those were like my summer jobs, right? So it wasn't a career yet. But I realized that there are so many facets to the industry. And so for my kids, it's like, I got Wes, who is wanting to go to school for engineering and finance.
Right.
Like, great. He's, way smarter than I ever was. He's got that kind of brain. And he's like, well, you think I can use this in the wine business? I'm like, ding, awesome. Okay. You're already like saying you got some level of interest. I'm not going to force you into it, but absolutely those two things would go a very long way. But in the industry of wine, everything from sales and marketing to the industrial elements of production, the artistry and chemistry of making wine and farming. I mean, one of the jokes that I say is like, not only if you have ADD, it's a great business.
You can do so many things.
Yeah, you're involved in everything.
Well, you can do accounting and finance and law and engineering. I mean, it's all encompassing.
And so I think that there's that part of it, and then the other thing is that pretty much anything you buy in life can be a write-off.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, exactly. This, right? Every, that soundboard there, that's going under the business, whatever, everything that we're doing here. So, it's true. That is nice. It's a good lifestyle to have. And what's funny, like from my perspective, I moved here, strictly to make wine. That's what I wanted to do. It wasn't because it was beautiful. It wasn't because, I didn't have kids. So it wasn't because it was a great place to raise a family. It wasn't because of X, Y, and Z. It was just that. And then what fucking luck that I show up and go, oh, it is all these things. And now, now you, in addition to getting to do what I want to do, which was making wine and growing grapes, I get to live in a great place and be around great people. It's pretty lucky.
I got to ask, at 25, you wanted to get into wine. How did you, what was, I want to know that story. How was the journey to get here?
Yeah. Well, and this has been told, and Mike's smiling over there, I think.
No, I like it.
You've heard this story a million times.
No, it's fine, though. It's a great question, Joey, because there are iterations of that from the inputs that you have already said from somebody that has lived here, that your family came up through here. And as Robbie just said, how he has kind of evolved from being here. For you to tell your story there, Mr. Meyer. Go ahead. Go right ahead.
So, my dad was an aerospace engineer, nothing about wine. He liked to have a beer, and when he was cooking, he had a glass of cream sherry. Oh. We would often have bottles of Manischewitz in the house.
All right.
And it really was, as a kid, I was just kind of industrious. I like to do things. I had my lawn mowing business and blah, 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 just, like to earn a few bucks. And I just dug restaurants, just not for any particular reason, because I like to go out with my family and be in a restaurant. It was cool. So it's like, I'll go get a job in a restaurant. And that was like super cool. I loved working in restaurants and all the energy and the production and the scene. It was just, I loved it. And they paid you. I was like, great, And so then I was working at this restaurant in Atlanta, actually out in the suburbs of Marietta, and it was a cool restaurant. And they actually had an extensive wine list. It was a private home that was purchased with a wine cellar intact. So they incorporated that into the restaurant wine list and had an extensive wine list. So it was just around. And as a kid, 14, 15, I was like, oh, that's pretty cool. I had these two mentors who were big food and wine people. They taught me all about stuff. And I'm cutting this way short because it's been told too many times, but I became the wine steward at that restaurant when I was a senior in high school, when I was 18.
Wow.
And then I went to University of Georgia as a science nerd, biology, chemistry, which fits great into viticulture and enology. And so when I was at Georgia, I decided to look into UC Davis, moved out to Davis, blah, blah, blah.
Okay.
So it comes from like 12, 13, 14 years old.
Yeah.
And it's really, I've had other jobs doing this, that, and the other, but if you're talking from, food and beverage industry, it's all I've done my entire life.
Yeah.
But it just started in Atlanta rather than St. Helena.
Yeah, man. That's. I can imagine getting into an industry that's probably mostly foreign, right? The production of wine, and then learning a bit about it. Going to Davis, I bet, was a great experience to really get closer to it and probably do some tours of places.
But see, also as a kid, I came out to California all the time, so I had actually been to Napa Valley as a kid, with touring around with the family or whatever. But I actually think it's funny. The historical thing you're talking about, the introduction of Caymus wines in 1972 or whatever. So this is like 1985, 86, 87 in Marietta, Georgia, and all I know is the wines that I'm serving. And so I served a lot of Freemark Abbey, Johannesburg Riesling.
Oh, wow.
which I love that for so many reasons, but also then how cool and surreal is it that I move out here, and who was the winemaker there at the time was old Charlie Carpy.
Oh yeah,
now then Charlie Carpy, my age, became a friend of mine, and then young Charlie Carpy was
a friend of
our boys, friend. That's like, dude, when I was 17, I served a shit ton of that wine, and now it's so and so's dad or whatever. Or what else did I serve? A lot of Jordan Cabernet. There's a lot of Jordan
even back then.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Anyway, that's how I got here. So it's an
great.
Interesting story, and it is cool to be here, and it's funny, just knowing all these people, like I knew Caymus before, I came out here or whatever the case may be. And that's actually making me think of one thing I keep saying, because I've known you as Joey.
Oh yeah.
But you go by Joe.
I go by
Does
Joe,
it offend you when
Joey,
people call you
Joseph?
Joey?
No, it doesn't. Anybody that's known me since I was a teenager, I think is what it is. And that's carried over because, my mom, my grandparents, my dad, they also, well, it's funny. My dad calls me John because he wanted me to be named John.
That's funny.
So I'm Joseph John.
Okay.
And then, but, generally in the industry, I go by Joe, just easy.
Yeah.
And,
but your dad is Joe.
That's Charles.
Oh yeah,
yeah,
that's right.
And then so you got like this. There's a whole plethora of I've gone by different names forever. You just yell at me, I'll be like, yeah.
I assume you're
talking to
me. Exactly. I know. The other one is I always say Jimmy Rigucci.
Oh yeah.
But do you call him Jim or Jimmy?
I call him Jim. I've always called him. So he's my uncle.
He's your uncle? I never knew that. See, I'm learning new shit all the time. I never knew that. So it's your mom's brother?
My mom's brother-in-law.
Okay.
Well, now former brother-in-law, but I grew up with him.
Right.
My aunt and him got a divorce, but he's always been very close, and he used to bring me around. It was a blast because he was just a total redneck, like a hick, right, growing up. And they were really young. I think he was like 19 when they got married.
Wow.
And they were together for 15 years or more, I guess. And so they brought me under their wing because I was my mom was working, my dad was working, and so I'd go and hang out with him and all of his buddies. And they all had their lifted trucks with the KC lights and the roll bars, and they're drinking Coors and in the bed of their pickup out in the vineyard.
Wait a minute! Whoa! We talking about California? We're talking about Georgia again.
See,
now.
that's the thing. Like that's the whole thing. It's like
minute.
People out here make fun of Georgia, and are you? This is more redneck than Georgia.
Isn't it so funny? It's like we go back to some kind of branding whether branding positive or negative, whether you dip in the bottle in wax, or you find out that you're from Georgia, or the slight variation of an accent, right? Says that, but a hick, a redneck is a whatever. And by the way, I'm throwing no shade to folks that you were mingling with, Joe, or because that's my family. That's probably somewhere in Robbie's family and all of our family trees. We have those same people
with the lifted truck and KC lights.
Exactly.
Yeah, I mean that's kind of how I identify. Honestly, I had to get a little more polished to be able to sell wine to certain people.
For
but
sure.
Right, exactly.
But so they drug me around everywhere. From 5 to 10 years old, they called me Tank because I was just this short kid that would do whatever they wanted that was entertaining, and they'd all be drunk and telling me to do some sort of like sideshow.
Right, exactly.
My God, there's a marketing opportunity right there. We think somewhere in your next future there, Joe, with Tank's Wines
would you pass
or
me
whatever.
that opener? I gotta get another Topo Chico.
All right.
Is it hot in here? I keep turning on the AC, but I don't know if there's like lights or whatever. It's like
I'm feeling good. Are you sponsored by Topo Chico?
No, we're going to be. No, I'm not kidding you. So the Mike is, I'm the one who brought this up. Would you like another one?
Sure. Yeah, I'll do another one. So good when it hits your lips.
Exactly. So it's no joke. This really is like my favorite thing, and we are yet to publish. We have several of our conversations, in the can or whatever, but we have no sponsorship or advertising. That'll come as we're doing our development. But I was like, Topo Chico is going to sponsor this. It's like I love it too much for them. It's like I'm an Atlanta boy, so Coca-Cola is an obvious one. But
they will. I mean, if only they were going to force their hands because simply we talk about them every single week, or for them just to say, for crying out loud, all right already, Topo Chico sponsors us.
You should do a collaboration, like do like a Pearson Meyer in like Chardonnay infused Topo Chico.
There you go.
There we go. All right, well played.
I like it.
I mean, we're not seeing enough wine seltzers out there, right? Like, they're moving into the vodka seltzers from the malt-based stuff, and I still don't understand why White Claw. But actually, we should talk about this for a second.
Yeah.
The seltzer category blew up. It's gone insane.
And you're not doing anything in that category.
Did a little tiny thing.
Let's see. All right.
But continue.
But okay. So what I think is going to happen here is that the seltzer drinker, which I've consumed plenty of them, from High Noons to White Claws, Trulies, whatever. But I think that they're going to migrate into wine at some point, and that's I think where we're starting to see that migration occur, where people are moving into rosé is a very healthy category. It's pretty damn mature now, but it's light, bright, fun. It's kind of like the wine version of seltzer. Same thing with Sauv Blanc. Sauv Blanc is one of the only categories in the wine industry that's really growing at a really good clip right now.
Yeah.
So I'm thinking that's everybody had their own entry point to wine, right? White Zinfandel was a big thing. Boone's Farm or Bartles and James.
Boone's Farm.
Yeah.
Orange Jubilee, MD 2020 Orange Jubilee, Mad Dog in a bottle.
Yeah.
So, and I'm with you 100% on that. Also, I'll have a White Claw or whatever, but over there in the corner, I've got barrel samples of Chardonnay. So, Mike, we pull samples to do analysis or to taste or whatever we might do. And some people pour them back in the barrel. I just never like to do that. So, I've got, wine sitting around. Those are bottles that were sampled a week ago. They're, half full. And I'll just take a big tumbler. Talk about being Southern redneck. I'll take, if I'm farming or cooking out here, whatever, I'm farming. If I'm mowing the grass or cooking, take a big tumbler, fill it full of ice, about a halfway of Chardonnay and a Topo Chico sparkling on top. And it's delicious. That's my cocktail. Right. I don't drink a lot of, bourbon and vodka and things like that, so that's my cocktail. I know it's not, my Pearson Meyer Chardonnay. It's whatever it is. It's refreshing.
It's a barrel sample. It's refreshing.
It's delicious.
It's funny you say that because my dad started doing that like 10 years ago. And he was telling everybody, he's like, he would take, my brother makes wine too. He makes a Marseillais Chardonnay.
Yeah.
And so he would take Marseillais, do a half and half with Pellegrino at the time is what he was using. But he's like, this is the best thing since sliced bread, and like sparkling water and white wine. Like it's a guilt-free wine cooler.
Totally.
That's
totally. And that is what I grew up on. Bartles and James. That was a big one at the time.
I did exactly the same. There was a point in time that maybe because throughout my college career of drinking those adjunct lagers that, copious amounts of cheap beer, right? That I created some type of an aversion, like almost like an allergy to drinking like the shittiest of beers. Like I drink a sip of who knows what it was because of all the Milwaukee's Best Light. I could drink a Budweiser at that point in time and it would make me feel sick. And I was like, well, shit, I can't go to a baseball game. I can't do anything. I can't, hang out at the pool. So I would start buying like the $2 chuck to, or cheap wines where I could then add my
Mixer.
what you just said,
Your
mixer, my I would call them wine spritzers, right? Of adding whatever my bubbly was to it. And so I thought, well, this is all you can do. And again, why I would say I would buy a cheaper wine because I felt like some bit of a sacrilege, right? To using a nicer wine. But Joe, you brought up a good point too, that like business models are moving of putting these together. And, like craft beer industry has been kind of doing this for a while, having collaborations where they do these weird combo. Well, I say weird. Is anything weird anymore? Combos of, coffee and this and or infusing wine or whatever.
Yeah.
Is there some kind of like, since you guys are in like a somewhat of a wine mecca of the United States, to be like pushback or whatever it is, purist that you go, you know what? We're going to resist. We don't want to do that. Even it's moving that way. You kind of indicated it's moving in that direction. And you just said it, Robbie. You have them over in the corner and you're kind of doing it, but you wouldn't put your better wine in it. Is there that thought space where you guys say it's a pushback?
You answer. I've got an opinion on it that it's not that like, we may push back against it. Like someone may criticize, some of our friends or whoever our colleagues may criticize me for putting my Chardonnay on ice with, Topo Chico in it. But more than that, if I was to make that as a commercial endeavor, there'd certainly be a lot of the, fancy people who would poo-poo that, like, oh, did you hear what Robbie's doing? He's doing this cheap ass, blah 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 blah.
That's exactly it, and I think it goes for really any industry, and you got to like put your line in the sand at some point and say, this is what I want to be known for, what I want the brands to be known for, and that sort of thing. And when there's something like that where you're going to have the, as we call them, the gatekeepers, and every industry has them, there's going to be people that are critical of you, and is that going to ratchet down what their level of respect for what you do is, and is that going to potentially damage the brand? I mean, I'll be honest with what like I've gone through in my life, my career. I mean, I make wines that are big and boisterous, and I'm pretty outspoken. I'm in a fortunate position of not being able to fire myself, so I can say some shit that people don't want to hear.
Yeah, right.
And that's a cool thing, but we're in a very dusty old industry as far as general marketing of wine, and it's not appealing to the younger generation. They need something different. It's not just the food and wine pairing and that sort of thing. Like, how do we bring that group up, but also still make sure that we are hitting all of the marks that are needed for really the core wine drinker out there that is ranging in age from say roughly 30 to 80. And so it really is it's an interesting dilemma that we're in as an industry right now. The stuff that's growing is growing well, but most of the industry, most of the low price stuff is coming down. Now, things like doing, this, if you did a Topo Chico collab, I mean,
so let's sell it to them right here.
So you're let's just go 50-50 and you're going to be coming in at like 7 to 8% alcohol. It's going to taste great. You pour it over rocks, and I mean, I actually think that, you
don't take my idea.
I'm not going to just push those naysayers aside and just say, look, what are you doing to bring the next generation in? Because this is the kind of stuff they're looking for.
Completely. Right.
And, you go out on a date night and it's going to be like, I was drinking White Claw 5 years ago. Now I'm drinking this stuff that's got some wine in it, and I'm on a date night. I'm going to be fancy. I'm going to buy a bottle of champagne or Pinot Noir or whatever. And all of a sudden it's like, oh, wow, that really was great with the food. That's that moment that people get into and realize wine is a product that's meant to be shared and enjoyed and augmented, augmenting whatever you're doing. And it does just that. I mean, I think that's why our industry is full of good people, is that you're all trying for the same thing, but you all have mutual respect, and you're all at the end of the day getting around a table.
Yeah, and to add on to that also in terms of like the pushback or producing this product, because I put that Chardonnay that I actually worked hard to make on rocks with sparkling water on top of that. That doesn't mean that I cannot produce at the highest level. That doesn't mean that doesn't exclude me from not being able to farm a certain way or to do whatever. A lot of the times that I see farming or work or wine production done with an air of snootiness, it's really like just being insecure.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I think it actually shows security. Go, yeah, I take my wine and put it on ice. I can do that, and I can do the other as well. It's
That's right.
Yeah, and I mean, you see that everywhere, right? It's in fashion designers and all that. There's
completely.
There's this element of holier than thou. I'm
Yes.
I'm great. I should be worshipped, and that's not what the wine industry needs. I mean, you go back to the greats of like Robert Mondavi, and they broke down the barriers of it being an elitist product.
Yeah.
And now, honestly, I feel that parts of Napa are kind of building that wall back up.
Oh, for sure.
And it's like, we did all this work. Napa did really the majority of the work. And then you had some big guys that were, doing some on the low end too, but breaking fine wine down so that people were like, no, that's not for a fancy pants, president of a company. This is like, you can enjoy this on a Tuesday night with just you and your wife.
Sure.
So building those walls back up has been a little frustrating to see, but I think we still got a lot of people in the industry that believe that foundation is still there, and you just got to keep on running with it and make it non-pretentious.
Yeah, I agree. And was that your point? I kind of interrupted you. You were talking about the hard seltzers and all those things. Were you saying that you support that because it brings and invites people into our industry?
Well, I think that there's going to be a swap out at some point. And what do you swap out to? Well, obviously, there's a lot of swapping out to hard liquor, right? So
right.
Vodka's not doing well. Gin's okay, and then you look at brown spirits; they're still on a rise, and so people are moving out to more spirit-forward cocktails. I think more so than they are moving out to wine. But if you're looking at the trends in wine and what it's selling, I would have to say that they are the products. They're the grape and wine products that are closest and most similar to a seltzer.
Mm-hmm.
And so, if that's their entry point, going from a White Claw to a Sauv Blanc. And then from a Sauv Blanc to a Chardonnay to Pinot to Cab. Everybody has their different journey and how they get into it, but we got to make sure that we're facilitating that journey.
Yeah, and keep all doors open.
Yeah,
and doors open for the Pearson Meyer Topo Chico collab. There's your gatekeeper.
I hope to God you get that done.
Hey friends, thanks for joining us for part 1 of our conversation with Joseph Wagner. Be sure to tune into part 2 where we compare wines to cars, where Joe explains what it's like to be a real-life Brady Bunch, and how he's become a TikTok sensation. As always, Drop the Check is brought to you by Pearson Meyer Wines. Pearson Meyer, a very, very good wine. You can even mix it with Topo Chico if you want to. See you next time.